African Americans in the 21st century. In the last half of the 20th century, Black Americans progressed socially, economically, and politically. The civil rights movement opened doors for millions of African Americans to enter the fields of education, business, sports, entertainment, politics, and the arts. Yet many Black Americans remain impoverished and still struggle to get through the doors of opportunity. Many African Americans left the South after the first two world wars and found higher paying industrial jobs in the North and West, forming the backbone of the new Black middle class. Vibrant Black communities, especially those located near wartime manufacturing plants, created businesses, nightclubs, and music halls, churches, and newspapers. African American soldiers returning from World War II used the GI Bill to purchase houses, obtain job training, and pay for their college education. Civil rights reforms also increased the educational and financial opportunities available for the emerging Black middle class. As schools and colleges across the country desegregated in the 60s and 70s, African Americans of all ages entered better schools to prepare for careers in law, medicine, and business that had been previously closed to them. To increase the number of African Americans in education and government employment, federal and state governments in the 1960s began a policy known as affirmative action. Many corporations also implemented affirmative action programs to boost the number of Black employees in the private sector. Integration and affirmative action worked well together. Only about 80,000 Black students attended institutions of higher education in the 50s, but this number rose to nearly 1 million a decade later. By 1976, the percentage of African American students at the nation's colleges and universities peaked at 9.3%. Beginning in the 90s, voters, presidents, and corporations elevated African Americans to highly visible public positions. U.S. Senators Carol Moseley Braun and Barack Obama, Surgeon Generals Jocelyn Elders and David Satcher, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Secretaries of State Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, and businessmen Kent Chenault and Stan O'Neill, among the first Black chief executive officers to lead major U.S. companies. Although centuries of slavery and segregation had prevented the growth of a Black middle class, some white Americans soon grew impatient with affirmative action programs, claiming they unfairly favored one group over another and amounted to reverse discrimination. Alan Bakke, a white student who hoped to become a doctor, sued the University of California Davis Medical School because its affirmative action guidelines, he declared, denied him a spot in the first-year class after less qualified Black applicants were admitted. In the first of many rulings on the issue, the U.S. Supreme Court in 1978 ordered Bakke's admission and outlawed the use of quotas in affirmative action programs. Since that time, states have scaled back or eliminated many of these programs. Special measures to help African Americans, Native Americans, and other historically disadvantaged groups continue to generate controversy. Following the lead of President Richard Nixon, who was elected in 1968, many Americans felt the civil rights movement had achieved its main objectives, and they withheld support for additional programs to expand social and economic opportunities for needy Black Americans. African American musicians in the last few decades have created music that appeals to a broad cross-section of the listening public. Because of the mass communication media, African American culture had been marketed throughout the world, and African Americans had consumed aspects of the cultures of other groups. White Americans and people in other nations had become more African American in their cultural outlook, while African Americans had become more like other Americans. African American artists branched out beyond so-called black music, excelling in opera, classical, and many other musical forms. They also took to many existing songs and sang them in new, innovative, and popular ways. Because millions of African Americans progressed in the 30-year period following the end of World War II, it was easy to forget that millions more had not. By the early 1970s, most black families remained poor, with African American income substantially below white income. Economic changes after 1990 eliminated most of the high-paying manufacturing and industrial jobs that black Southerners of a previous generation had migrated to find. As African Americans enter the 21st century, they have freedom, but their struggle for equality still continues.